All right, so let me share the screen. And here's the opening prayers. Saji Bugi Jujin Meto Tan Rira Linjin Yende Genba Dia Sange Shindu Meta Uwagi Odogu Nanda Jinga Juba Ju Idon Guru Rana Mandala Gamni Yeta Yami. I'm sorry, Bobby, this is on page, that was on page 16.
I was wondering, okay.
And then the next prayer, Bobby's here in person, so that's what I'm talking to in the room. Next prayer is on page 18. There you go. Sangye chudan sugi chonam la jaju badu dani kasu ji dagi juji gibe sunangi dola benchu sangye dupa shu. Sangye chudan sugi chonam la jaju badu dani kasu ji dagi juji gibe sunangi dola benchu sangye dupa shu. Sangye chudan sugi chonam la jaju badu dani kasu ji dagi juji gibe sunangi dola benchu sangye dupa shu. And before I get to today's question, I want to answer a question from Bobby, since Bobby's here. Bobby had asked me about refuge and how do you meditate on teachings about the mind and the emptiness of the mind. And this prayer is perfect for it. So I thought I could spend a little time just going through it so you know what it is that we just said, that you're welcome to take it into your practice because part of this class is learning different ways to practice and meditate. So the first word here in the Tibetan, it says Sangye, and that refers to the Buddha. Song means completely clear, Ge means completely developed. In a previous class, I mentioned that the nature of the mind, according to Buddhism, is clear and knowing. So we all have Buddha nature. We've had that nature with us, according to the Buddhist view, from beginningless time. It's been polluted by ignorance, hatred, and desire, and all the related afflictions, and that's what keeps us suffering. Because when we act within that um, realm of emotional and cognitive distortion, then it throws us in and out of suffering. And I'll get into that in more detail so you can kind of see the Buddhist picture of where we are. Um, However, the good thing is that the Buddhist view is that the basic nature of the mind, its clarity and its knowing capacity, cannot ever be stained or it can't ever be destroyed. And so, no matter how polluted it gets with ignorance, hatred, desire, jealousy, pride, wrong views, and other things like that, it can still be purified, just like dirty water can be distilled so that it can become drinkable again. So, the basic structure of it is that there's a primal ignorance in which we take our consciousness to be me. And that's not the nature of the consciousness itself. It's a cognitive distortion that's been primordially there. And that's why we keep cycling, because whenever there's a sense of me, there's a sense of mine. And when that happens, there's clinging, desire, then anger, fear, and all the other afflictions come from that. And so that misapprehension of a me is a cognitive distortion. It's not how the consciousness really is. The consciousness is free of that self nature. And so if we're able to instead of clinging to me and mine, if we're able to develop wisdom that sees that me grasping is distorted and incorrect and not how the mind really is, then we can dispel it. If we're able to dispel that primal ignorance, then karmic causation and all the suffering it produces stops. So, in other words, we can stop our suffering if we, instead of developing our ignorance and afflictions, we develop our wisdom, our compassion, and our kindness, and all those enlightened features. The Buddha is somebody who has completely sung, completely cleared out all the crap, right? And totally eliminated it from its roots so that it can't come back. And yay, fully developed wisdom, compassion, loving kindness to their fullest extent. So that's Sangye. And so we go for refuge to that in the attempt, I want that, right? And since we have a mind, we have the potential to take our mind from where it is into a fully enlightened mind. Now, out of the Buddha, what the Buddha did, I mentioned last time a Buddha can't pull out our suffering like removing a thorn. They can't wash away our negative karma like with soap and water. What a Buddha does is appears and they teach. They say, here's what I was able to do. You can do it too. And here's how. And that's the Dharma. So the next part of the refuge is Cha. Cha, literally, in a mundane way, it means phenomena. Anything that it means to contain something in a way. But at a sacred level, it means anything that holds us back from suffering and brings us towards that enlightened state. And in Sanskrit, that's dharma. That's what a dharma is. So there are two types of dharma. There's realizational dharma. I mentioned the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of what causes suffering, karma and afflictions. Then the truth of cessation means suffering can be ended. And then the truth of paths that lead to that cessation of suffering. So one part of Dharma is the cessation in the mind of Buddhas and higher beings. And it gets complicated, right? And it leads to the next point. Um, when somebody starts out on a path and they develop their renunciation, let's say, or even better, if they develop bodhicitta, the wish to become enlightened to help all beings, when that becomes natural, they enter what's called the path of accumulation. And within that, there are three levels. In the beginning level, that attitude can be turned back. But when it reaches the second level of the path of accumulation, it becomes so steady that it's called like gold because it just becomes part of the nature of that person. And then it's kind of irreversible, kind of. It's not irreversible yet. But if the person continues, there's a path that comes after the path of accumulation when somebody starts to fully develop their ability to concentrate and their intellectual, conceptual understanding of what emptiness is and what dependent arising and emptiness are. When that starts to get really clear and steady, then there's a second stage of irreversibility where that person is bound almost irreversibly towards a direct realization of how things are. Not totally irreversible yet, but there's kind of a cessation in that person's mind. If the person doesn't give up and they keep going, then there's what's called the path of seeing. When that conceptual understanding of emptiness in deep meditation becomes non-conceptual, and the person sees through the illusion of a self directly in deep meditation. When that happens, then there's a higher state of irreversibility, um, and there's a real cessation, the cessation of cognitive distortions about reality, learned cognitive distortions, like you've taught that you have a self since you're a kid. That's a learned distortion.
Are
Yeah.
are we talking over the span of multiple lifetimes here? Or are we talking?
It depends on the practitioner, the level of the practitioner, how hard they study, how hard they practice. It can take many eons, or it's said that with higher teachings, particularly the highest level of Vajrayana teachings, that you can attain it in your present life. But that's like Milarepa, where
Yeah.
someone was able to do it. So it depends. It depends on a lot of things. But anyway, if you, there's still, for instance, somebody who has bodhicitta and wants to become fully enlightened, they still can be reversed. Even at that level, they can be reversed. But you go through what's called the path of meditation, where you repeatedly go into that direct realization. And it's compared to putting armor into fire, and the fire burns away all the blood and all the gore on the armor. And similarly, when you put your mind into that one-pointed meditation on emptiness, it burns away all sorts of negative, afflictive states of mind. And it starts to purge the mind of those cognitive and emotional distortions until the mind gets clear, clear, clear. And it goes through what are called bhumis, or grounds of realization. When it gets up to what's called the eighth bhumi, then at that point, the afflictions of mind, including ignorance, are completely destroyed, where the mind no longer has those afflictions or that ignorance in it. Then you're really irreversible. At that point, there's no way to fall back into uncontrolled rebirth. It said that
Yeah.
the path of seeing and above, bodhisattvas no longer fall into lower realms of existence, but they can still have some problems.
That actually was a question of mine. Well, can they fall? But no. Okay.
Yeah, once you reach that level, you're pretty secure in your path, to go forward. But it's not totally irreversible. It's not until that eighth bhumi that the person is basically liberated from cyclic existence and suffering. They still have cognitive distortions that prevent them from seeing everything, omniscience. And so the last three bhumis are called pure bhumis, in which those cognitive distortions on the mind are slowly burnt away. And when they're finally completely burnt away, then somebody becomes a Buddha.
Can you spell boomy?
Um, Usually in English, it's spelled Bhumi, Bhumi.
Thank you.
In Tibetan, it's called Sa, which means ground. Um, and Bhumi is Sanskrit. But anyway, so Dharma, in the realizational part of Dharma, are those true cessations in the minds of people on the path. And the complete cessation is somebody who's a completely enlightened Buddha. Sangha, the next part of this equation, Soki Chok, means the supreme assembly. And that refers to Sangha. At a relative level, those are monks and nuns, or a community of practitioners like the people on this call or in this room. It could be called Sangha in a relative way. But in a high way, that's somebody who's reached that path of seeing or above. Those on the path who reach that eighth bhumi, that eighth ground, are called Mahasangha, higher Sangha, because they're really reliable. At that point, they're not going to fall. And so you can put your trust in them. So these are called the three ratnas, the three jewels. The relative form of Dharma are the teachings that a Buddha or a higher being gives, leading you towards that path of cessation and beyond. So that's who we're going to refuge to. The next line, Zhongjub is Buddhahood. Bardu means until Buddhahood. Agni, I, Gyabsu Chi, go to you for refuge. So this is like a safe direction. So, and you find this in all religions. There's a figure that they say, oh, you can trust this, whether it's God or Jesus or Muhammad or, it depends on the religion. Um, whether all of those are in the same direction, you have to ask God. But hopefully they are. Hopefully they're all going in the right direction. I think anything that's teaching you to be compassionate and to care about others and to be ethical is probably a safe direction, right? But these are they're they're called the Kunchok Sum, which means the supreme rare three. It's very hard to find anybody like this. Most of us are regular beings who have our flaws. But I'll tell you, when you meet a really accomplished teacher like Yume Khyentse Rinpoche, who I mentioned earlier, it'll it'll make you believe. You hang around with them for a while, you'll see the integrity and just how deep their wisdom and their kindness and their compassion go. And that's really reassuring when you're able to see it for yourself and relate to somebody like that. So that's the refuge part. The next part of the prayer, Dagi by me, Jin Sok, Jin means to give, Sok means so forth. So that's talking about the six perfections of giving, morality, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom, which are the basis of the Bodhisattva path. Those are the actual practices. Jipe means doing those perfections. Sunam ki means the virtue that comes out of practicing those perfections. In Buddhism, there's a sense that virtue kind of has a non-expressive form, if you will. It's not something you can see, but it's something that does indeed exist. And you'll know it when you meet a great teacher like Gyume Khyentse Rinpoche. You can feel the virtue around him. When you sit around him and he's teaching, you feel better. You don't know why, but you feel better, right? And it's like there's an atmosphere around him that's just clear, uplifting, and joyful. And you get a sense of him. That's kind of the virtue that he carries. It has that kind of transformative effect. So anytime you do a good deed, it's that you're collecting virtue. You're creating virtue in your mind. And so it's saying, by all the virtues I've collected, by doing the perfections and so forth, Drola Penshir, Drol means transmigrating beings. Drol literally means to go. It's like we're all going in and out of birth and death in different realms. Penshir means in order to benefit all beings. Sangye Dubasho, may I attain the state of a fully enlightened Buddha. So that's the prayer. And it's setting your motive for listening to teachings by saying it. But this can be like a main practice to say this prayer 3 times in the morning and 3 times at night. And the way you turn it into a very complete practice is you imagine in front of you the Buddha made out of light, like almost like a holograph. And around the Buddha, all these enlightened beings. And you imagine they're looking at you with total compassion and understanding. And you're surrounded. On your right is your father, on your left is your mother, whether they're still alive or not. All your friends behind you and around you, extending as far as you can imagine. All beings who you feel a little uneasy about are a little in front of you and below. It's considered better to have them in front of you where you can see them. And you just imagine this sea of beings in human form, and that you're leading them towards refuge and well-being. And so as you say this prayer 3 times, you keep these meanings in mind. And then afterwards, you imagine that um, light comes out of the Buddha and all the enlightened beings around him, and it falls like rain on you and all the beings around you. All beings become purified, including you. And then the Buddha, all the enlightened beings absorb into the Buddha, who absorbs into a ball of light, golden light that comes to between your eyebrows, enters into your body, reaches your heart, joins your mind and your heart, and your mind takes the form of a perfect Buddha, enlightened Buddha in your heart. In that enlightened Buddha that's non-dual from your mind radiates light throughout your body and mind. All of your negativity is purified. All your illness is cured. All your sadness is uplifted. And you imagine that that light totally purifies your body and mind and then radiates out to all those beings around you, purifying all of them as well. And that all those beings who are now enlightened around you absorb into you. And then you absorb into that Buddha in your heart. And then that Buddha dissolves into the clear, empty nature of your mind. And then within that clarity of your mind, you contemplate its empty nature, and that it's moment by moment changing based on the previous moments of mind, each moment depending on the previous moment, so that it has no existence of its own. It's dependently arising moment by moment. And that's a Mahamudra meditation. Very quick way to do it. And then at the end, you can arise as you are, usually are. But maybe imagine that that Buddha is still in your heart. And you can offer food, first portion to your food to it. That you kind of have that sense that you're cultivating your Buddha nature, which is the clarity of your own mind in its empty nature. So anyway, I thought that might be a nice meditation if you want that you can do.
I will say, some of the best advice I've read about that, especially for starting out, because I struggled at first, is to not go elaborate straight away because you'll lose it. Um, I found that if I keep it simple, that I can kind of add things and they stick. It's kind of weird. It's I don't know. But I have found that that's, and I find myself narrating too. Like I tell myself what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the correct way or not, but it seems to work. My mind doesn't take trips and start thinking about groceries or whatever while I'm trying to build a scene, you know. But that's my advice. It seemed to work for me.
Could everybody hear Bobby on the call? You could hear what he said.
Yeah, I
Yes,
heard.
thank you.
Okay. So yeah, at first simple is better. Um, did you, just out of curiosity, Bobby, did you find that the meditation I just gave was too complex, or did you find that it was followable?
I found that it was followable because I kind of went in it with that. I've tried the visualization. I have an imagination. I can come up with all kinds of stuff. I just haven't done it in the context of meditation. And so it was a little new. Um, but I did find that keeping it relatively simple. Instead of a whole host of enlightened beings, like right there, like
Yeah.
I put a few up there, you know?
Yeah. That's why I didn't go into detail. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I just kind of,
At first, it's hard to get there in this kind of visualization meditation. There are two attributes you're going for when you meditate. One is kind of a steadiness of mind, and the other is a clarity of mind. For the steady part of a visualization or an imagination, you just try to imagine that whatever being it is you're trying to connect to is there. You don't have a clear image, but there's just some sense that I've actually invoked the enlightened beings. Why can you be sure they're there? Well, if they're omniscient, they know you. They know what you're going through. They know what you want. If they're fully compassionate, then they're there for you.
I do find that it becomes easier to go back to that place.
Mhm.
Um, like right now, I can bring it up if I want to, like I won't, sit there and getting, enraptured with it, but whatever. But throughout the day, I've noticed that those images do come to mind,
Mhm.
if I want to take a quick mental break, it's a nice little trip. And then I go back to normal.
Well, that's why it's done a few times a day. It's like touching in with that luminosity and that goodness,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you start to get a habit of it, then your mind starts to want to stay there longer. And when you get that, when the steadiness is there, like you really do feel like you're communing with a higher force and you're starting to get a steadiness that it's really there for me whenever I need it, then you can get into the clarity. The clarity, the steadiness helps you get towards one pointed meditation. The clarity of the details helps your wisdom get more accurate and more developed, more um, astute. And so once you get that sense of this is where I want to be, and you start to spend longer times with it, then you can fill out the details. And then it's safe to get more elaborate meditations that take you ever deeper towards that enlightened state. And that's where the tantras are. They get more detailed and more involved, but it's all the basic same stuff that I just told you.
Hmm.
So, all right. So that answered, I hope that answered that particular question. Getting to today's question, which I think is right on target with where we are. I'm taking you back to the text that we started. Um, I know this was 2 classes ago that we started this, but I wanted to get back to it. And I actually did think for the people here to make paper copies so you can see it.
Good, I can pick up my water too.
Okay. Um, so we started with this first verse last time. Lamsun Namsun means the 3 aspects of the path. Jetsun Lama means venerable Lama. I'll do it over here in case you don't know the Tibetan. Namla means plural, and La means to you. Jaselo, I'm prostrating, and it's showing some reverence. So in Tsongkhapa, who wrote this text, had many teachers. He studied every single tradition that was in existence in Tibet in his day, and he mastered them all. And he became such a great scholar and debater, nobody could defeat him in debate. But midway through his life, he met a very simple but mystical Lama named Lama Umapa. They had had dreams of each other. They were in different caves, and they had dreams of each other that kind of drew them towards each other. At that time, Tsongkhapa had done a retreat on a deity named Svaraswati, and he started having visions, and um, it became very famous that he had been taken under this deity's care by deity in the Buddhist tradition, it's an enlightened being, and they have a certain form. This was a female enlightened being who had taken Tsongkhapa under her wing. She's known for poetry and wisdom and enlightened speech. So Lama Umapa wanted to learn about that, and so he sought Tsongkhapa out. And when he met Tsongkhapa, he told him this curious story. He said, from a very young age, I was a shepherd. And one day I just heard this mantra welling up, I don't know from where. Omara Pazani, Omara Pazanadi. And suddenly I had this vision of the Bodhisattva of wisdom, Manjushri. I don't know if I have an image of Manjushri on the wall, but he's depicted as this youthful prince. He's orange in color and he's got a sword raised up, a flaming sword. And in his left hand, he's holding a volume of scripture of the perfection of wisdom. The sword represents that non-conceptual wisdom that sees emptiness directly and that sees exactly how things are. And the volume shows that scriptural Dharma of spoken words. So he had this vision, and Manjushri told him a verse of Dharma. And then every day since that time, Umapa had another vision each morning, and Manjushri would teach him another verse for the day, the scripture. And so this had been going on since he was young. And so he met Tsongkhapa, and he said, am I crazy? I mean, is this a delusion? Or what's happening to me? Is Manjushri really guiding me? Is he really appearing to me? And so they had this conversation that lasted hours. And after really examining it, Tsongkhapa said, you're not crazy. Manjushri is actually appearing to you. The reason you're having some confusion is he's appearing directly to your mind. He's not going through your sense powers. And so that's why you're feeling like you're not sure whether it's really happening. But he said it's really him. And then Tsongkhapa said, by the way, I have some questions for him. Would you be my translator? And so he started, Umapa invoked Manjushri, who was right there with the two of them. But Tsongkhapa couldn't see him, but he knew he was there. And then Tsongkhapa started asking all these very detailed questions to Manjushri, because in all of his studies, he had started to get confused because different masters sometimes said different things that seemed to be contradicting each other. And so he started trying to clarify all those points that he was having problems with. And then he told Manjushri what he had been studying and where his thoughts were about the nature of reality. And he asked Manjushri, so would you say that my viewpoint is more in line with the Svatantric Madhyamaka or the Prasanjika Madhyamaka? Those are the two highest schools of Buddhist thought, philosophical thought. And Manjushri said, neither. So Papa felt crestfallen because he was the greatest scholar in all of Tibet. And if he was out of touch with what reality was, then who could he go to? And so he said to Manjushri, well, how do I find the correct view of how things are? And Manjushri said three things. You should go into retreat and try to collect as much virtue as you can and try to purify negativities from your mind as much as you can and constantly supplicate your teachers. And so that was Manjushri's advice. So Gaba went into southern Tibet into retreat. He did so many prostrations, the rock outside his cave became smooth with his body. He did so many mandala offerings that his bones started showing through his wrist from rubbing the mandala plate. And he started having visions. And then one night, years into the retreat, he had a dream that all the lineage masters of the profound view of emptiness were sitting around a campfire. And one in particular, named Buddha Palita, showed him a volume that he had written and said, "You'll find your answer in here." And so that morning, Tsongkhapa woke up and he got that volume down and he looked through it and he started to read it. And he suddenly had his last doubt removed about correct view. He finally entered into the actual view of dependent arising and emptiness. Not non-conceptual yet, but a correct conceptual model of it. And so then he wrote his famous poem in praise of dependent origination. So all this is a long roundabout way of saying that finding a spiritual guide is actually quite an important deal. And that's how Tsongkhapa made so much progress. And by the time he died, um, there's an account of his life that was written by one of his disciples, Kedrubje. It's in the first volume of these volumes you see behind me, um, called The Door of Faith. And you go through the whole story of Tsongkhapa's life, and then as you near the end of it, Tsongkhapa is now about 62. He lived from 1357 to 1419 or something like that. Um, but he was near the end of his life. And at this point, he was so famous, like people were coming out of the woodwork and they built three major monasteries dedicated to his teachings, Ganden, Sera, and Drepung, which are still in existence. They were destroyed in Tibet when the Chinese took over, but then the monks who fled occupied Tibet rebuilt them in southern India. So they're still there to this day. But anyway, he was getting ill. He's getting close to 62. And they were taking him from monastery to monastery to show him what was happening with his teachings. Um, and it said, J said that what started to happen was rainbow light started hitting the palanquin they were carrying him on wherever he would go. I think his last trip was from Drepung Monastery to Ganden Monastery. And so this phenomena, they all knew he was special, but they didn't know how special. And so the monks were kind of flocking around him as they took him to Ganden Monastery. And once he was at Ganden Monastery, he he went into a meditation room that was set up for him, and he sat in full Vajra position. And he started doing what's called Vajra repetition breath. It's a special high Vajrayana practice that I won't tell you a lot about now. But he did some practices. And so the monks were all sitting with him, his closer disciples were all sitting with him. And Kedroj says that he watched his face. And by this time, he had a lot of wrinkles. And he said suddenly his face became very smooth. The wrinkles disappeared. And then this very luminous light started to pour out of his body. And it was so bright that it was hard to even look at. Some of us saw white light, some saw yellow light, some saw orange light, but we all saw it. And suddenly it was like he was transfigured into this divine youth. And then that just disappeared. And all that was left was Tsongkhapa's body. But it said in front of him there was rainbow light, that the rainbow streamers went down into the valleys around Ganden like victory banners, and that no wind stirred for 49 days. 49 days is roughly the time of a bardo.
Yeah.
And so he said that there was this weird dance among the monks of total grief because they had lost their teacher, and then profound awe of what they had witnessed, and that no one had ever heard about anything like that happening except in the ancient days of the Mahasiddhas. And so that was Tsongkhapa. So that's who we're reading. He's pretty much giving us a guide map for how to get there, how to get his realizations. But again, all that came through his teachers. So I thought I'd try to answer Dave's question. Well, how do you find a teacher? What do you look for? And how do you go to them? Because I think Bobby had the same question. All right. There's a sutra called the Jewel Ornament Sutra that was written by Maitreya. And it was passed from Maitreya through a Sangha. Um, so one thing you look for is somebody who's really tamed by practicing morality. They're very ethical. They wouldn't hurt a fly, literally, and they're totally honest to a fault. They're not obsessed with accumulating money. They're not at all deceptive. What you see is what you get. They'll tell you the truth. They don't sugarcoat necessarily. But you look for somebody who's really practicing morality deeply. The second thing you look for is somebody who's really at peace by practicing meditation. And if you ever read Gyume Khenchen Rinpoche, he's always practicing meditation, always cheerful. His laughter is just infectious. Um, and then the third quality is not only are they at peace through the practice of meditation, but they're thoroughly pacified by their practice of wisdom. They're dwelling in that clear light nature of their mind all the time and meditating on the emptiness of themselves, their aggregates, and everything around them. That's where they stay. Fourth, they've heard many, many teachings, more than you. So they have a wealth of scriptural knowledge. Fifth, they have the wisdom that correctly understands emptiness. They know what it's the Sanskrit word for emptiness is shunyata. So they really have a correct view of emptiness. Sixth, their positive qualities outweigh that of the student. And so you should look for somebody who's more developed than you are. Seventh, they should be skillful in speaking and know how to guide you, how to lead you towards those realizations. Eighth, they should teach you because they're feeling compassion, not because they want your money, not because they want your respect, but because they care about you. They should have that kind of compassion. Ninth, when they teach, they do so joyfully, with effort. They don't mind going through hardship if it's to guide you. They'll do what they need to do. And 10th, they have tolerance for your shortcomings. Instead of abandoning you because you have flaws, they understand it and they don't hold it against you. Usually with Gyume Khenchen Rinpoche, if he sees a flaw, he'll just giggle. The last time we were talking about judge, being judged. In a lot of religions, there's a sense that there's a final judgment, and the higher being sends you to heaven or hell or wherever based on how they judge you. And I mentioned there isn't a judge in Buddhism. In fact, the Buddha said, you're your own best friend. You're your own enemy. You are your own judge. So nobody else can judge for you, right? If you act and you cultivate your better nature, you're being your own best friend. If you give up on that and you follow negative impulses, you're being your own worst enemy, and you're the only one who can judge. That said, enlightened beings are like umpires. They will kind of give you signs of whether they think you're headed in the right direction. And sometimes they can be a bit wrathful. One of my main teachers, Samrikin Rinpoche, would not hold back. If he felt somebody was doing something stupid, he would make a joke at their cost, and he would be very clear about it if he felt somebody was messing up. Um, but then he would still love them and still take care of them, you know. So that's what to look for, you know, those qualities. Yeah.
So in the context of, going back to, you need to have a teacher, of course. Um, does that mean like, because there are all kinds of teachers. There are ordained teachers, there's lamas, and there's lay teachers. I guess my question would be more institutional. What do they mean? Do they mean a lama? Do they mean a lay teacher? What do they mean when what is meant?
Technically, anybody who willingly teaches you even a verse of Dharma, from who you willingly listen to that Dharma, is your teacher,
Makes sense.
right? And it could be a layperson, a monk, a nun, doesn't matter. In fact, there's this one famous story of the Buddha in a previous life where he got captured by a man who was a murderer who wanted to kill him. And right before he got captured, he had listened to a teacher teach a verse of Dharma. And he had asked him questions about the verse. And then he got captured by this murderer. And he said to the murderer, um, before you kill me, I listened to this beautiful verse of Dharma, and I really want to make some offering to that teacher. So could you let me go just for a minute? I'll go make my offering, then I'll come back, and then you can kill me. I mean, he was a great bodhisattva, so he wasn't worried about losing a life. And so the murderer said, oh, you're afraid, aren't you? You're going to escape if I let you go. This is just a ruse. And he said, no, I promise on my life, I promise I'll come back. And so the guy, he had murdered many people. And so he just curious about this particular individual. So he said, okay, I'll see who you really are. And so this previous incarnation of the Buddha went to the teacher and made him an offering. And then, true to his word, he went back to the murderer. But then the murderer became curious. He said, "What was this verse that you're willing to give your life for? I don't understand." And so then the Buddha was able to teach him the verse, and it changed the mind of the murderer, who then changed its path in a different way. So anyway, um, that's who a teacher is. So there is a practice where you imagine all the people who brought you this far, and you just mentally are respectful to them all. That said, it's said that the root guru of unparalleled kindness is somebody who teaches you Vajrayana teachings, gives you initiation, and then teaches you commentary on how to practice it. And so you should be very careful about who you choose for that level of teaching. These 10 qualities that I just told you are for Mahayana teachers, like sutra level teachers. But if you decide you want to enter into the Vajrayana or the diamond vehicle, then there are two more sets of 10 qualities you should look for that I'll talk about later, if anybody wants to learn them. But when you enter that level of a relationship with a spiritual guide, it becomes a little more profound, right? Does that help?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how to go to such a person when you find them? Um, you can make, it's said that such figures are incredibly potent in terms of karma. So when you make a virtuous relationship with somebody like that and you create good karma with them, it's said to be the most potent kind of good karma you can make. Contrary to that, it's also the most bad karma you can make. You mess them over. I heard a story last night of this Zen monk who was one of the great patriarchs of Buddhism in Japan. And I think his name's Koko. I can't remember his name, but he settled. There's there's still a whole tradition of Shingon Buddhism in Japan that he started. But he had direct realizations of Buddhas and Vajrayana, and he was really a realized being. But he was a monk, and he wandered through this island. He built 88 holy sites on this island. But there was a man that lived there who was incredibly wealthy. And so he went to the man with his begging bowl, and he figured he has a lot of money. He could probably feed me. So he went and he begged, and he got shushed away by this man. But then he had the chutzpah to go back and ask again. And this time the man was even more wrathful, and how he sent him away. But not to be deterred, he went for a third time with his begging bowl, and this time the man grabbed the bowl and broke it to pieces and then beat him. And it said that the karma was so awful for the rich man who had done that, that shortly thereafter, all of his 8 children died. And when the man, totally overwrought by grief, went to figure out, why did this happen, it became apparent to him it's because of what he had done to this humble monk. And so what happened is then the man went on pilgrimage to those 88 places and did purification, and eventually he was able to purge what he had done, and he became enlightened. so so it is said it's better to have positive relationship with your teachers than none. In terms of what quality, if you want to serve such a teacher, you can do that through physical things like offering or helping them, you know, with their activities, or um, kind of material assistance if you want to. It said that you can help them, you can create good karma verbally by singing their praise if it's valid, or, helping others connect to them, or you can do it mentally. Um, it's said that the highest way to serve any teacher is by practicing what they've taught you. That is the secret and the highest way to serve a teacher. Because a true teacher who's just teaching you because they're feeling compassion for you, what they truly want is for you to purify your own problems and become enlightened so that you're no longer suffering. That's what they truly want. And so if you want to please a true teacher, it's through practice. And then they'll be overjoyed. They'll be delighted. Qualities of a student. If you want to be a really good student, honest and open-minded, intelligent, that you're capable of distinguishing between a true path and a fabrication. In spiritual realms, you hear a lot of people pretending to be spiritual teachers, and that can teach you all sorts of stuff that'll take you off track. So you should have some discerning intelligence about, no, that sounds true, that doesn't sound true. There's a teaching that more important than your teacher are the teachings you get. More important than the teachings you get are those teachings that are in line with valid scriptural sources. And then more important than those valid scriptural sources are direct realizations of the truth for yourself. So that gives you kind of a roadmap of how to distinguish between true paths and fabrications. And then another quality it's good to cultivate is a wish for the correct path, respect for Dharma and your teachers, trying, being discerning about where you are, honest with yourself. Above all else, know yourself and have a wish and effort for developing your positive qualities. And then honest and unbiased about which negative qualities you've actually abandoned, which ones you still have to work on, all that kind of stuff. So we'll get into how to listen to teachings and a teacher in a little bit, but I wanted to start with that as kind of a preamble to it. I went over this verse last time, but I'll just go through it really quickly before we go to the next verse. Yawe Sunra Kungi Ningbo Dun means this is the essential meanings of all the excellent speech of all the victorious ones. So he's about to teach us the essential meanings of all the teachings of the Buddha. Gyalse Dampa, those pure bodhisattvas, Namgi by them, Ngakbe Lam means this is the path that all of the bodhisattvas praise. Gelden Tarde means the lucky ones who wish for liberation. Namgi Jugmonde, this is the entry point for all those lucky ones who want to become liberated. Jita Nu Shin, as well as I'm able, Dagi Sheparja, I will tell you. So this is Tsongkhapa's vow to compose the text and his motive for doing so. This brings us to the second verse. Excuse me. Ganda Sipe de la Machak Shing. And he's going to kind of teach us the three principal aspects of the path by this next verse, which is for us on how to actually listen to it. Kandak is whoever. Sipe is the cycle of birth and death. Dela, the happiness of samsara. To that, machakshin means not clinging to that, not having desire for that. So what is samsara? Bobby wanted to learn Tibetan, so I wrote out a definition of samsara.
It's so clear. Thank you.
But I'll tell you what it is if you don't read Tibet, so don't worry. This word over here, I don't know, Bobby, can you read?
Oh, I'd rather not. I recognize the sounds, but
Okay.
yeah.
This word is le, la sa le. That means karma. So you know, in Tibetan, that's karma. Karma, as I said before, there are different kinds of causation. There's physical causation, what causes, read physics, and that'll tell you how physical causation works. There's biological causation. I see Lucia here, who's a doctor. The body has its own causation, right? And chemical interactions in the nervous system and everywhere else, in different organs in the body and so forth. There's that kind of causation. The mind has its own causation. When we act, speak, or think, those are actions of mind that are called karma. That's what karma is. It's actions of body, speech, and mind. It's a mental phenomena. Causes have effects. So that's karma. Dang means and. That's dang, ang, dang. The next word is nya, naro, na, nyun. That's how you pronounce that. Ma, naro, na, mong. Yun mong means afflictions. Afflictions are basically any state of mind that disturbs your peace. So anger, jealousy, pride, fear, all the different things that don't feel good are afflictions. The only kind of thing that disturbs your peace that's not an affliction is regret when you've done something terrible, because that helps you be a better person. Regret can help you as long as you don't overdo it. But everything else that disturbs your peace is an affliction. So, le don yumo, karma and afflictions, be, yumon be, ba a giku be, that giku a at the end of ba shows that it's like an apostrophe s. Shows that the next word kind of belongs to this. Karma and afflictions, apostrophe s. Wong, dao, ba, nga, wong. That's how you pronounce that syllable. Um, Wong means power or influence. So, under the influence of karma and afflictions, that's what's being said thus far. Ga yatak gi, I'm sorry, ga yatak ya giku gi sa gi. That sa at the end shows that it's an agent, meaning by that. So, by the influence of karma and afflictions, wrong means self. Dao, ba, nga, wang again means power. So, one's own power, ma, drambo, me, da, me, means none. So, powerless. So, powerlessly, uh, bar, that belongs to Mepar, without any power, and this is a complex syllable, so I'll spell it out. Sa, ba, yatak, ja, naro, jo, ra, jor. Ba, jorwa is how that's pronounced. It means joined. So the whole meaning of this definition of samsara is being joined helplessly under the influence of karma and afflictions. When we are helplessly influenced by karma and afflictions, we are in samsara. And so, sorry, I've got to reach. So, what does samsara look like? Oops,
Oh.
sorry. I'm juggling too many things. I do this. I used to be a busboy and I would carry too many plates sometimes. So I don't know if you can see this. I'll tell you what, instead of showing you this, I'll bring up a clear copy in the Zoom. Okay. So that's the picture of what I'm showing. So under the power of afflictions, in the hub are symbols of ignorance, hatred, and desire, the afflictions. At the outer ring, there's a blind man. That's right here. There's a blind man with a cane. That shows that primordial ignorance, thinking of the mind as me, the body is mine, and having that clinging to self. The cane shows that it's not steady because it's an adventitious and inaccurate view of what consciousness is and what the body is. But that ignorance of me and mine, where does it head? It heads to this next link, Here, there's a man making pots. He's turning clay into different shapes and forms. Clay is malleable, right? Whatever you use it for, you can make a pot, you can make a cup, you can make a design of a cat, or you can mold it into anything. Similarly, under the influence of ignorance, when we enter into actions, whatever they are, good or bad, they form seeds in our mind, different shapes and forms of things that we're going to become based on the action, the motive for the action, and what we actually do. That's karmic formation. Who carries the karma? That's this third link. There's a monkey. He's eating a fruit, swinging from branch to branch. He's eating the fruit, and the seeds are falling on the ground. So, similarly, when we enter into actions, the karmic seeds fall into our mind and are carried forward by our own minds. It said in this amount of time, there are 64 moments that are each a karmic seed. And so we're creating these karmic seeds every day, all the time. Um, Countless. There are some scriptures say even more than that. Um, this is immature karma. Moment to moment, we're creating it. We can't stop ourselves. As long as we're under the sway of ignorance, then we're creating karma. Um, I guess since I'm on this, I'll keep going so that you get a sense of it. Um, oh, no, I'm out of time, aren't I? Um, Keep that in mind. We'll come back to this. It's really important to understand how this works so that you can protect your mind. I heard one teacher say last night, the whole Buddhist path is about taming the mind. From the beginning to the end, it's about taming the mind. So if you can, first of all, replace this ignorance with the wisdom that sees emptiness, then you stop creating karma because there's no ignorance that leads to the next link of karmic creation. And so it's incredibly important that one little bit of information is incredibly important. We'll come back to it. I do want to finish the second verse though, otherwise we'll never get through the text. So I'll just tell you what it means and then we'll go in more depth next time. So whoever does not want to keep chasing after happiness in samsara, because when you do so, you're creating causes for suffering. Everybody wants happiness, but because of not knowing what causes happiness, we're all chasing after causes that are going to create suffering for ourselves. So that's the first aspect of the path, which is renunciation, wanting to be free of that process of causing suffering for ourselves. Daljor means leisure and fortune. Dunya means to make meaning of leisure and fortune. Jachir, Sumpa means effort. Jachir means making effort for the purpose of making this life meaningful. Leisure and fortune means we have a perfect human life. We've had occasion to enter into the teachings. We have everything we need to extricate ourselves from suffering and its causes and to make full benefit of it. If we develop the wish to become fully enlightened to benefit all beings, then we've really made it meaningful. And that's the second aspect of the path, which is developing that bodhicitta wish. And then the third aspect of the path, Gyawa Gepa Lamla Yitan Pe, Gyawa means victor as a Buddha. Yepe means pleasing them. Lamla, the path that pleases them. Yitumbe, meaning having a wish to enter the path that pleases the Buddhas. So what pleases the Buddhas, as I said? When you extricate yourself from the cycle of existence. What pulls you out of the cycle of existence? Wisdom. That's what will liberate you. And that's the third aspect of the path, that cultivating that wisdom. Gelden deda dawa yikinun. Gelden means lucky ones. Dedak, you lucky ones. Dangwei means pure. Yikinun means listen with a pure mind. So this is his verse to us. I'm going to tell you as best I can how to liberate yourself. Listen well. That's what he's saying. We'll come back here next time, but I don't want to keep you too long. So I'll put up the verses so that we can dedicate the virtue for listening to this. Sashi Bagi Suji Medo Tan Rirali Shin Yinde Gemba Dia Sangye Shindu Meda Uegia Dogo Nanda Shinga Jeba Sho Idon Guru Rana Mandala Kamneya Dayami Gawadi Gao Kun Sunam Yeje Sozo Shin Sunam Yeje Lejunwe Damba Kunye Doba Sho Janju Zenjo Rinpoche, Ma Ye Guana Ye Ye Je, Yeba Nyamba Meba Yang, Gone Gondu Bawa Shu, Gari Rawe Koe Shingande, Bendan Dawa Malu Juwene, Genrezi Wan Dancing Gato Ye, Shebe Side Bardo Dengyo Chi. So I'll go through those dedication verses another day. You guys have put up with me long enough. But any questions before we sign off? Right? Are your brains full? All right. Good to see
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your time.
Bye,
Sure.
Good night.
Wilson.
Stay healthy. See you next time.